Hi everyone, my name is Karen, this is my channel RatherBeReading, and today I'm bringing to you my August wrap-up. Apologies that this video is so late. I have just posted a life update video to my channel, which I'll link in the cards if you guys want to check out, explaining kind of where I've been, but I did want to post my August wrap-up even though it's really late, because I know when other booktubers that I watch go away for a bit and then they come back and I'm like, but what have you been reading? So, and we're still like only in September. It's not like so late that I'm like months behind or anything. So to get into my statistics, as always, I read a total of 22 books in the month of August. That was made up of 15 novels, 1 graphic novel, 5 novellas, and 1 manga volume. The 22 books were made up of 15 books I read in physical copy, 5 ebooks, and only 2 audiobooks in the month of August. And then excluding the audiobooks, as always, I read 13 books that I owned and 7 from the library. I read a total of 6,382 pages in the month of August, which averaged out to 206 pages per day. So once again, I managed to keep that above 200 pages, which is really good. The longest book I read in the month of August was 523 pages, and the shortest book I read was 35 pages, which was one of the novellas. Although I'm not sure what the technical like page numbering is that you need for like a novella or whatever, if that technically is like a novelette, I'm not sure. The highest star rating that I gave in the month of August, I gave 2 books a 4.25 stars, and the lowest star rating that I gave 2 books only 2 stars. So my average star rating for the month was only about 3.3, so a little bit lower than where I would like it. So I did, as always, film not as always because I'm not filming one for September, but I did film a mid-month wrap-up in August, which again I'll link in the cards for you guys to check out, in which I talked about the books that I read from the 1st through the 15th, which was the first 11 books that I read in the month. So I will only be talking about the 11 books that I read from the 16th through the 31st. So let's jump in and talk about the 11 books that I managed to complete in the second half of August. The first book I want to talk about is The Light Between Oceans by M.L. Stedman. I buddy read this with Aoife over at Fred Weasley Died Laughing. I wasn't sure going into this if I would enjoy it or not. This is a book that is set in Australia, and it's a historical fiction. It's set in 1926, and it is about a young couple in their kind of mid-20s. He's a little bit older than she is. She's, I think, probably in her early 20s, and he's maybe in his late-ish 20s. It's a bit of an age gap. They are recently married, and Tom is the light keeper for a lighthouse, which is off on an island. So they live on this island, just the two of them, with no other contact with anyone else except for a supply boat that comes over once every couple of months or whatever. And they have been struggling to have a baby. Isabel has been pregnant several times, but has lost the baby several times through miscarriages, and then also has a stillborn baby as well, which is really sad. And then they're really devastated by all these losses, of course. And then one day when they were on the island, not too long after she has had the stillborn baby, a boat washes up, we would call it a tinny here, I don't know what it's called anywhere else, but a small boat washes up on the island, and inside the boat is a dead man and a baby. And Tom and Isabel kind of make the choice to keep the baby, because nobody not on the island, because they don't have contact with anyone, realizes that she's had a stillborn. So they decide to keep the baby and raise the baby as their own, assuming that the baby's parents are dead, and if they give the baby over, it will be raised in an orphanage, etc. That was a really long-winded synopsis. I apologize. I'm out of the habit of filming booktube videos. So I really actually enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I would. I thought the writing was really nice. I loved Tom as a character. I liked Isabel, but I struggled with her, which if you've read this book, you'll understand why, because some of the decisions that Isabel makes throughout the story are just really hard to wrap your head around and come to grips with. And she's also quite unapologetically selfish. There was also some interesting commentary I found in this on a man who has served in the war. So Tom served in World War I, and at some points in the book, people look at that and use that as evidence as to him being a violent man, because he must have killed people in the war, and that must mean that he's a violent person. And I found that quite shocking and just like really interesting commentary on that, because that is definitely the way some people were treated when after they had served in the war, like maybe even now, but definitely back then. To me, the main thing that I took away from this is it's about good people making bad decisions and what kind of comes of that. That just because maybe they haven't made the best choice doesn't mean that they aren't good people. And so I find that really interesting commentary. In the end, I really, really enjoyed this and I gave it 4 stars. Next, I read Slammed by Colleen Hoover. So this, I don't think it says it on the synopsis, but I don't think this is a spoiler because it happens right at the start. Basically, this is about a girl named Lakin and a guy named Will. Lakin has just moved to like a new town and she has this kind of encounter with Will, and they're really attracted to each other and they share a kiss and they're, you know, really attracted to each other. And then she goes to her new school and discovers that Will is her teacher. So it kind of goes on from there. There's, you know, some like squicky issues around him being her teacher. He's not super older than her. He's like in his early 20s and she is 18 already. So like that's not really an issue. It's just kind of the whole, you know, teacher-student thing that's a little bit, yeah. I enjoyed this. It was okay. It is very kind of like insta-lovey. Not really insta-lovey, but like these two are like so, they have this like one encounter, like they go on like one date and have like one kiss and like maybe meet up like a couple of times before they discover that and they're so devastated. Like their lives are ripped apart that they can't be together. And I was just like, really? I don't know if that's just because I've never experienced that I just really couldn't get behind that. I don't know. I did really love the two brothers in the story, and I really did like Eddie. Will was like really kind of possessive and could be quite manipulative, which I did not enjoy, but it was like a really like easy, addictive type of read. This is the first Colleen Hoover book that I've ever read, and it is the first book she ever published, so I'm assuming that her later books, like she improves as a writer, but I did enjoy this, and in the end I gave this 3.25 stars. Next, I read Fierce Kingdom by Jen Phillips. This is a book that I was approved for on NetGalley, so thank you to NetGalley and the publishers for approving me to read this one. This is a thriller type novel about a woman and her 4-year-old son, I think he's 4, and they quite often go to the zoo. They go to lots of different places, but a zoo is one of their regular spots where they go, and they're one day at the zoo and it's right before closing, and the main character is rushing with her son to get to the exit when she sees a man with a gun, basically, and she flees back into the zoo to like escape this man. And I can't remember, did she see someone with a gun? I think she's heard noises that she thinks are gunshots, and she sees people like injured or whatever, so she puts 2 and 2 together and she flees back into the zoo. And basically it's about, the whole book is set over like 3 hours or something of her being trapped in the zoo with her 4-year-old son while there is this whole very intense situation going on. I did enjoy this quite a lot. I had some big problems with it though. So I found the story really like intense and gripping, and the bond between the main character, whose name I cannot remember, and her son Lincoln was freaking adorable and felt very like honest, even though I'm not a mother, so I can't really say, but I have a mother. It felt like very real to me. Like I felt the main character's like love for her son kind of coming off the page and her desire to just protect him at all costs. I really felt that. The book had some perspective changes that I just found completely unnecessary, and the ending was way too ambiguous for me. And then in addition to that, there are a few points that I was like, nah, it didn't come across as that believable. But I did overall really enjoy the story, and it was a really quick read. Like I said, it's only set over 3 hours and it's not too long, and it was just like kind of a really quick, easy, like engrossing type of book. So I did really enjoy it, but it had some problems. I gave this one 3.5 stars. Next, I read Point of Retreat by Colleen Hoover. So this is the sequel to Slammed. This one was okay. I'm actually looking at my rating and I gave it 2.75 stars, which looking back is maybe a little bit generous. So this follows the events of Slammed, and one of the major problems that I had with this one, which is one of my least favorite like things that happens in YA, is the amount of emphasis placed on the main character's virginity. Oh, it drove me absolutely nuts. And there was like this whole thing that comes up about something that the main character like promised like to her mother, and oh, that infuriated me. There was a lot in this that I just found infuriating. It also has the trope of like two characters just really not communicating very well, and that drives me insane as well. So it was, again, a really like quick, easy, like kind of in read. Like I got through this really quickly. It was really easy to read. And like I said, I gave it 2.75, but maybe a little generous. Next, I listened on audio to Legion by Julie Kagawa. This is the 4th book in the Talon series and the last book that has been published so far. There are going to be 5 books in the series, but the 5th book is not published until, I believe, April next year. So I have to wait quite a while to get to that one to kind of find how it all wraps up. I actually really enjoyed this installment. I loved that the love triangle is kind of resolved in this one. So we're not like waiting for the last book to find out who she's going to pick. It's kind of resolved. I mean, the author could still like kind of decide to fuck it all up. But for the most part, as far as it stands now, the love triangle is being resolved, which I appreciate, not having to wait an extra book because we've already waited 4 books. I also, there's a lot that I want to say about this that I probably can't say without spoiling previous books, so I'm not going to go too into it. I did want to touch quickly on the narration. So this book is narrated by Caitlin Davies, McLeod Andrews, Chris Patton, and Tristan Morris. And I have said in the past that I really enjoy like kind of the full cast narration. I'm starting to find that I don't love the way it's done in this book. So I, since having read this, have read another book, which I'll be talking about in my September wrap-up, that also had like 2 different narrators. And in that book, it was done in the style of as if you were having a conversation. Each person did their own part of the conversation. So it was like a back and forth between the 2 different narrators. That doesn't happen with this full cast audiobook. It's like when it's in like, say it was my perspective, I would be doing that narration. And then when it's in another perspective, it would be that person doing the narration. So in my part, even when it's someone else talking, I'm doing the narration. So some of the voices like don't match up as well. And there's a side character who has an English accent, and some of the narrators are freaking terrible at the English accent. Like the English accent in some parts is laughable. Like it's really like fake and cheesy, and that drives me a little bit nuts. And yeah, like I say, when they're doing the other characters' voices, it just, I don't know, it kind of takes me out of the story sometimes because I'm like, well, that's not how like he sounds when he's narrating. Like it's just, I hope that you kind of understand what I'm trying to get at. And since I have since read another book that didn't have that, had the 2 narrators, but it was kind of more of the back and forth style, I've decided that I much prefer the kind of back and forth style. But anyway, that's just an interesting note. And in the end, I gave this one 3.25 stars. Next, I read All the Missing Girls by Megan Miranda. So this is a thriller, like mystery thriller novel about a girl who, one of her best friends went missing when she was a teenager. And she since has left the small town and hasn't been back to the small town like very much. And her dad is having some medical issues like with Alzheimer's and things like that. And she and her brother have decided to sell the family home. And so she returns to the small town to help with the selling of the house and all of that. And another girl goes missing, and it brings up everything about her friend who went missing when she was a teenager, and so you're kind of dealing with both of the mysteries. The main interesting thing about this book is that it is told in a reverse format. So literally you get, so I think at the start we got like a little bit of like the present time, but then we went back to before the crime happened, and you get each day, sorry, no, I'm not telling it right. So you get a little bit before, and then you jump to like the day before. So you get each day, and then you get the day prior to that and what led up to the day that you've just read. So it was quite an interesting storytelling way, and I thought the author did a really great job of kind of giving you little tidbits, but still without giving you any real clue as to what was going on. It was very like engrossing read. There were a few things at the end that I had a little bit of a problem with, and like a few questions that I didn't think were addressed very well, but I did like the main character's voice, and in the end I really enjoyed this, and I gave it 4 stars. The next book I completed was This Girl by Colleen Hoover. So this is the 3rd and final book in the Slammed trilogy, and I really didn't like this one. This is one of those books that is just the first book retold from the male's perspective as opposed to the female's. I will give the author kudos in that she did it in a bit of a different way, in that it is set after the events of the prior 2 books, and you have the main female character is asking the main male character questions about what went on in the first book, and then he's answering them and like reflecting back, and then you get this huge passage that's just like what happened in the first book from his perspective. So she kind of tried to do it in an interesting way, but this adds nothing new to the previous, like literally this adds nothing new whatsoever. It also, I think, amplifies all of the issues that I had with the first 2 books. Are just like amplified 100-fold in this. There are also some like fights that happen in this, in the like present day storyline, that are frankly ridiculous given the circumstances, which I can't go into because it would spoil the other books, but it was just ridiculous. In the end, I gave this 2 stars. Next, I read Festive Deception by D.B. Tate. So this is like book 2.5. I've read the first 2 books in this series like quite a while ago. They are set in Australia in the Blue Mountains, and they're like mystery books, and I saw that there was this 2.5 little novella, and it was, I can't remember if it was free or quite cheap on Kindle, so I decided to buy it because I did enjoy the previous 2 books. And it is just a novella set around Christmas that has like a small little mystery in it, like a quick mystery obviously because it's a novella. And actually, like, I enjoyed this as much as I kind of have the other 2. I like the romance in this, as I always have done throughout the whole, like, previous 2 books. I love the setting, as I have done in all of the books. The setting of the Blue Mountains, which is in Australia, if I didn't already say that, the author does really, really well. I liked the mystery. I didn't love the ending of the mystery, but I did really like the mystery, and in the end, I gave this 3.5 stars. Next, I read Everything, Everything by Nicola, which is the I listened to on audio, which I was just talking about a minute ago and thought that I read in September, but I actually read in August. So this is the book that I was talking about that had the dual narration that was the 2 people talking back and forth, which I really enjoyed, and the 2 narrators were Barney Turpin and Robbie Draymond. So if you don't know what this is about, it is about a teenage girl who is allergic to everything, and she lives in her house in like a controlled environment where there's nothing, like no outside influences that could cause her to have a severe allergic reaction basically and die. And a boy moves into the house next door to her, and she strikes up a communication with him, and then kind of like a romance unfolds, but obviously she's like trapped in her house. And that's what the story's about. You've probably heard a lot about this on BookTube because at one point it was really, really hyped. I enjoyed it, but I also did have problems with it. I enjoyed the characters. I know a lot of people said that it is insta-lovey, and I can kind of see that, but at the same time, I kind of understand it given Maddie's history. Like, she's never had any interaction with like a boy ever. So if you like literally have never interacted with like any cute boys, and then a really cute boy moves in next door and he's really nice and funny and sweet and he like seems to like you, I feel like you would fall head over heels with him, particularly if you were only like 16 years old. Anyway, but I did have problems with it. There is what I consider to be a particular medical condition in this book that is not named, and I just thought that was terrible. There is also a lot of people who say that the disability rep in this is really, really terrible, and I can kind of maybe see what they're saying, but I can't speak to that as I don't have the disability. I did, as I mentioned, really like the narration, but there's also the main like kind of thing that happens in the plot of this that kind of starts to drive it all forward. I just didn't believe it. Given everything that like happened, like given this, I just didn't believe it. But I did overall, when I finished the book, I enjoyed it, so I gave this 3.75 stars. Next, I read Where There's Smoke by Judy Pico. This is a just short little novella that is set around one of the side characters from one of her books. I believe it's Leaving Time. It's set around the kind of TV psychic who can like contact the dead or whatever. I don't think it's a psychic medium. Is that the correct word? I'm not sure. Anyway, and it's just set around her. I did like it. I liked the premise, but I didn't... It just felt really incomplete and like too short, as I always basically end up feeling with novellas, but I did enjoy it. In the end, I gave this one 3 stars. And the final book that I completed in the month of August was Shatter by Tahereh Mafi. So this is a book that I'm sure you have heard a lot about on BookTube. If you haven't heard of it, this is a YA dystopian book that is set in a world where the main character Juliet has a lethal touch. So if she touches someone, they will die, and that's basically the premise of the story. I don't want to go into too many more details than that. This book gets really mixed reviews. There are some people who absolutely love this book and you hear raving about it all the time, i.e. Whitney at Witty Novels. There are also a lot of people who really hate this. Mari from My Name is Marinez, she does a video each year which is like a mashup of a lot of different people talking about their best book and their worst books of the year. And so many people in that video last year named this as their worst book of 2016. So I was like, even though I'd heard really good things about it, I was like really tentative going into it. But I actually quite enjoyed this. A lot of people's problem with this, I believe, is the writing. And I can see that why people wouldn't like it. I at first was a bit like, oh, I'm not sure how I'm going to feel about this. But as the story went on, I came to really actually enjoy the writing. I personally like found the writing style like something that I just really enjoyed. I like the characters. I see a lot of potential in Juliet and her character. I loved Kenji. There's a lot. I did think that the world building could have used a bit of work. Like there's not really any world building really at all. Like you're in this kind of dystopian setting, but I didn't understand like what had, like why they were in this dystopia, like how had the world got to the point that it was in, and like what actually was going on in the world. And like I kind of get it at the start because of how the book starts, but as the book went on, I felt like we should have got more like explanation of that. But given what I've heard about from people who loved this going forward, I'm really interested to kind of see where this is headed, and I did really enjoy it, and in the end I gave this 3.5 stars. So those were all the books that I read in the month of August. I apologize if this video was a bit all over the place. As I said, I'm a little bit rusty and out of practice with talking about all the books that I've read, and I feel like it showed in this video. But I would love to chat with you guys in the comments down below if you've read any of these books, if you have any thoughts or any books that you read in August that you really, really loved, or really, really hated, whatever. I would love to chat in the comments down below. Please like this video if you liked it. Please subscribe if you want to see more from my channel. But that's all I've got for this video today. Bye guys!